In the 1950s, every housewife had a needle, thread, and sewing kit within reach. Clothing wasn't disposable like today, and every garment carried value. When a button popped off, a hem came loose, or a shirt tore, it wasn't tossed aside. It was carefully mended, often the very same evening. Housewives took pride in their sewing baskets, neatly organized with spools of colorful thread, shiny pins, and thimbles. Children often sat nearby, watching as their mother's hands moved swiftly, repairing socks, shirts, or school uniforms. The soft sound of the needle slipping through fabric was as much a part of home life as the ticking of the kitchen clock. Beyond repairs, many women sewed clothes from scratch. With fabric bought at local stores, they created dresses, aprons, and curtains tailored with love. Patterns were cut from paper, pinned to fabric, and brought to life on the family sewing machine. Each stitch wasn't just practical, it reflected patience, care, and creativity. This tradition went deeper than saving money. It instilled values of resourcefulness and respect for belongings. Children learned that clothing was to be cherished, not wasted. The simple act of sewing connected generations, with skills passed down from mothers to daughters. Today, most of us replace rather than repair. But in the 1950s, a housewife's quiet evening with her sewing kit told the story of a time when every thread woven into fabric held both purpose and pride. Ever wonder what Sundays looked like back in 1950s America? Families had a tradition we'll never see again. It was called Sunday Best. Every man, woman, and child dressed in their finest clothes, even if they didn't have much. Fathers put on crisp suits and polished shoes, mothers wore their best dresses with pearls, and little kids wore shiny shoes and neatly pressed outfits. It wasn't just about style, it was about respect, dignity, and pride. After church, these housewives would walk proudly with their families down the block, stopping by neighbors' homes for Sunday dinners. Imagine the smell of roast chicken, apple pie cooling on the window, and kids playing outside in their church clothes, a picture-perfect scene of unity and tradition. Today, we slip into casual wear, even for special days, but in the 1950s, appearance was a reflection of values. Housewives carefully ironed, stitched, and polished every detail, making sure their families looked their very best. This simple act of dressing up made Sundays feel sacred, a day for faith, family, and togetherness. And here's the secret. Those Sunday best clothes weren't just fabric. They carried memories, photographs, and milestones. Generations later, those same dresses and suits are tucked away in attics, holding stories we'll never relive. Do you think bringing back the Sunday best tradition would bring families closer again? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to hit subscribe if you love revisiting the beautiful traditions of 1950s America. Can you imagine a time when housewives didn't need social media to connect? In the 1950s, women had their own secret network, the afternoon coffee clutches. Picture this, it's 2 o'clock, the kids are at school, and the house is spotless. Neighbors would gather in each other's living rooms, pouring fresh percolator coffee into delicate china cups. Alongside the coffee, there'd be homemade cookies, coffee cake, or even Jell-O desserts straight from a glossy recipe card. But this wasn't just about sipping coffee, it was about sharing life. Housewives swapped recipes, exchanged tips for cleaning stubborn stains, and sometimes whispered about their struggles and dreams. It was therapy without calling it therapy, a safe space where women leaned on each other in a world that often expected them to keep silent. The sound of laughter, the clink of spoons against saucers, and the comforting smell of freshly brewed coffee filled the room. For many women, these gatherings were the highlight of their week, a reminder that they weren't alone in the daily grind of cooking, cleaning, and raising children. Today, coffee dates are quick, rushed, and often shared over a screen. But in the 1950s, the coffee clutch was sacred, a circle of trust and friendship. It's a tradition that gave housewives strength, joy, and a sense of belonging, something many of us crave, even in our fast-paced world. Before Pinterest boards and cooking blogs, every 1950s housewife had a secret treasure, the handwritten recipe box. Inside those small wooden or metal boxes were index cards carefully filled with recipes, passed down from mothers, grandmothers, and friends. Each card carried more than just ingredients, it carried memories. Imagine opening one of these boxes. You'd find a slightly stained card for Grandma's apple pie, written in neat cursive, maybe smudged with flour from years of use. Another card might say, Betty's famous casserole, shared by a neighbor after a church potluck. These boxes weren't just collections of recipes, they were living family histories. Housewives guarded them closely, often adding notes in the margins like, add more cinnamon, or bake 5 minutes longer. Some even slipped in handwritten love notes tucked between recipe cards, making these boxes little time capsules of everyday life. Back then, cooking wasn't just about feeding the family. It was about preserving traditions, connecting generations, and creating a sense of home. Every time a dish was served, it carried the fingerprints of family legacy. Today, digital recipes vanish with a click, but those old boxes, yellowed, fragile, and full of love, still sit quietly in attics and kitchen drawers, waiting to tell their stories. Think about it. A recipe card could outlive its writer, becoming the bridge between past and present. And once those handwritten boxes disappear, we lose more than food. We lose the stories that made us who we are. In 1950s America, the dining table was more than just a piece of furniture. It was the heart of the household. Every week, families gathered around it for a proper sit-down dinner, a ritual that shaped connection and belonging. Housewives prepared full meals from scratch, roast beef or chicken, buttery mashed potatoes, fresh rolls, and vegetables from the garden. The smell of home cooking filled the air as children hurried to wash up and set the table, while fathers returned from work expecting the comfort of a warm meal and familiar faces. These dinners were about more than food. They were moments of unity. Families bowed their heads in prayer, shared stories from the day, and laughed over simple joys. The clinking of silverware and the glow of soft lighting created an atmosphere of warmth and stability. For housewives, this ritual was an expression of love. Every dish carried effort and intention, from carefully seasoned casseroles to pies cooling on the window. Children grew up understanding that the family table was a place of respect. No rushing, no distractions, just time spent together. Today, our fast-paced lives often leave meals eaten on couches, in cars, or in front of screens. But in the 1950s, the weekly family dinner was sacred. It reminded everyone that no matter how busy the world outside became, the table inside their home would always bring them back together. In the 1950s, housewives mastered an art that feels almost forgotten today: seasonal canning and preserving. When summer gardens overflowed with tomatoes, cucumbers, peaches, and berries, nothing went to waste. Instead, kitchens transformed into little factories of love and labor. Large pots of boiling water steamed on stovetops, while glass jars lined the counters, sterilized and waiting to be filled. Housewives carefully peeled, sliced, and stirred, adding just the right amount of sugar, salt, or vinegar. Children often helped by snapping beans or tightening lids, learning that each jar represented hard work and care. The process was time-consuming, but it meant security. Rows of colorful jars, ruby-red jams, golden peaches, crisp pickles, filled pantry shelves, a visible promise that the family would be nourished through the cold winter months. Opening a jar of strawberry preserves in January was like capturing a piece of summer sunshine in the middle of snow. These traditions were also social. Neighbors often exchanged recipes or traded jars, strengthening community ties. A jar of homemade jam or pickled vegetables carried not only flavor, but also affection and pride. Today, store shelves are stocked year-round with anything we crave. But in the 1950s, housewives understood the rhythm of the seasons, and preserving food was both a necessity and a ritual. Each sealed jar wasn't just food, it was memory, patience, and the sweet satisfaction of self-reliance. In the 1950s, grocery shopping was not the quick, impersonal task it often is today. For housewives, it was a carefully planned ritual that combined skill, resourcefulness, and community. Lists were written neatly on scraps of paper, often organized by what could stretch a week's budget the farthest. Instead of massive supermarkets, most women visited small neighborhood shops. The local butcher was a trusted figure, wrapping cuts of meat in brown paper and sometimes slipping in a little extra for loyal families. Housewives knew him by name, and he often knew theirs. A trip to the bakery meant the smell of warm bread filling the air, while the corner grocer greeted regulars like friends. For some families, ration stamps still lingered from the war years. Housewives learned to make do with what they had, trading recipes and tips on how to stretch ingredients into multiple meals. Every purchase was deliberate. A sack of flour meant fresh bread, pies, and Sunday pancakes. A dozen eggs might become both breakfast and cake batter. Shopping wasn't just about food, it was about relationships. Children tagged along, holding their mother's hand as she chatted with neighbors in the aisles. The store wasn't a place to rush. It was part of the rhythm of daily life. Today, we push carts through bright aisles and self-checkout lines. But in the 1950s, grocery shopping was personal, filled with familiar faces and woven deeply into the story of home. In 1950s neighborhoods, mornings began with the quiet clinking of glass bottles left at the doorstep. The milkman was a familiar figure, arriving at dawn in his truck, carrying crates filled with fresh, cold milk. Housewives relied on this daily ritual, and children often woke to the sound of bottles being placed neatly into the metal carrier by the door. Each bottle had a cardboard cap that popped off with a gentle push, releasing the rich cream that floated on top. Some families poured it into coffee, while others skimmed it off for baking or special desserts. It wasn't just milk, it was a symbol of freshness, reliability, and a connection to local dairies. Housewives often left empty bottles outside, rinsed and ready to be exchanged. Alongside them, little handwritten notes requested more cream, butter, or even eggs. The milkman became part of the household routine, almost like a distant relative who never missed a visit. This daily delivery carried a sense of trust. No one worried about bottles disappearing from porches, and children loved rushing out in their pajamas to grab the morning milk before breakfast. In winter, bottles sometimes froze, the cream pushing the cap up in a frozen tower, a sight many still remember with nostalgia. Today, milk comes in cartons pulled from supermarket shelves. But in the 1950s, the delivery of glass bottles to the doorstep marked the start of each day, a small tradition that gave families both comfort and rhythm.